Hello there, welcome to Gardiner's World. Finally I'm back, and thanks to Andrew Goff for standing in for me recently when we had Robert Bauval on the show. Strangely enough tonight, we have Robert Bauval on the show. He came all the way from Spain, so we're really pleased to have you, Robert.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for coming on the show yet again, and it was great that Andrew stood in for me, and what a show.
Yeah, sorry, I'm wearing the same clothes, by the way. I haven't changed yet.
It's okay with you. I wasn't going to say, but, you know, it just shows how much money we make out of books, doesn't it? Not an awful lot. Obviously, you are really, really famous around the world for some fantastic books, for books that got people like myself, and, you know, and most of these on here started. You know, you're up there with the likes of Colin Wilson and of course, your good friend Graham Hancock. And, you know, absolute, total respect from me.
Thank you.
And thank you from all these authors for getting us started on this road when we were just, you know, knee-high to a grasshopper. Yeah. Now, I think that the people out there, they know a lot about what you've done. They know about the Orion correlations and, you know, the work that you did with Stargate, you know, the Pyramid Gateway thing that got in the front of the newspapers all over the world.
Right.
But what are your opinions on a lot of the other things that there are? I mean, you know, if you look at this bookshelf, we've got all kinds of things. We've got Knights Templars, we've got Rennes le Chateau, 2012, all kinds of different things. You know, I'd like to know some of your opinions. I mean, let's pick one of those. Rennes le Chateau and the old bloodline mystery.
Yeah, let me sort of give you a broad view of how I see things. First of all, as a researcher, I mean, and I underline that. You know, a lot of people are claiming to be researchers, and there's a way to research.
On the internet, isn't it? It's with a mouse?
Well, you have to be very careful with the internet. I mean, there's a very important word that is used by all researchers. It's called sourcing. You know, and it simply means, you know, where do you get information from? And I'll give you a banal idea of how things can go completely haywire. If you don't do your sourcing correctly. And it depends on the importance. I mean, if you're writing an article for Woman's Own or for the Daily Mail or something, and you're going to talk broadly about the ancient Egyptians, you make a mistake there, so what? I mean, it's no big deal. I mean, you put the wrong date or something. But, you know, people take you on face value, you know, so you have to be very careful, first of all, as to what you influence people with, and what you are influenced by. You know, why do you accept certain sources as valid as others not? Now, one of the things not to do, and that's a no-no, it doesn't matter what the source comes from, whether it's academic, whether it's amateurish, you don't accept sourcing by authority. It's the most dangerous thing you can do. You know, sort of trust me.
Yeah.
You know, I'll give you a good quote, which I love, you know. There's actually a very funny book that was given to me by one of the very controversial writers, Eric von Daniken.
Oh, right.
Eric von Daniken is, unlike what people think of him, he's a lovely man, actually. He's a very funny man. I have to say from the outset, I'm not into his theories whatsoever. Although I find it interesting. I mean, I found what he wrote, it's stimulating, it's interesting. It's not convincing, but it's interesting. But as a man, and he's a very, very interesting person to meet. And he wanted to meet me just before I wrote the Orion Mystery. He wanted to give me some advice.
That's nice.
And I thought, why not? At least he knows a lot about publishing and all that. And so I went to see him. And in fact, what he wanted to do was to give me a book. I actually went all the way to Switzerland. He lived in the Solothurn in those days. Lovely little town. And I stayed a weekend there. We had lovely, lovely talks. But mainly what was interesting is to hear from him, you know, the controversies and how he had been arrested by the Swiss police and how the Pope excommunicated him and all this business. However, he gave me a book, which was the essential reasons for calling me, which was written by two journalists who have founded something rather weird called the Institute of Expertology. I actually keep this book. It's one of my favorite books. They still exist. I mean, they're based in New York. And they've made a point of studying famous quotes from experts.
Right.
And they realized that, you know, the greater majority of these experts had it badly wrong. You know, and the famous ones that most people know is the captain of the Titanic, for example, saying it will never sink, you know. Or one of my favorites is the officer who launched the charge of the Light Brigade, you know, with the famous last word saying, "Trust me," you know, and they trusted him. So there is the great danger of accepting a source on authority. You know, he knows what he's saying, so I'll accept it. You know, and it's very strange how people do accept authority if it comes from either a well-known scholar or a notable, you know, a member of parliament or something like that. But these people not only can be wrong, they can be deceptive, you know, for all you know. Or they make serious mistakes, you know, and this book is full of these. I mean, there are some gems there, I mean, some incredible gems. I won't quote, but I mean, it deals with every topic, you know, and you can imagine in medicine, for example, I mean, all sorts of crazy stuff, and until very recently, you know, here in Victorian times, you know, apparently some boys used to get castrated because they masturbated too often, you know, and things like that. They thought it was a sickness. It's incredible that people accept authority, and to the terrible consequences. Now, as a writer, what you don't want to do is accept something on authority and then realize that the authority you took on made a mistake, and you've just developed a whole theory on a mistake. And it happens. I mean, I won't quote some authors, but I can quote this one as a very good example. The astronomer, well-known astronomer, who's a very good friend of mine, Giulio Malli from Milan Politecnico. He's not just a well-known mathematician astronomer, but he founded the first chair of arc-astronomy in Italy. So he's that caliber of a man. But he made an awful mistake. It wasn't a mistake, he just accepted a source on authority. He developed a theory, which ended up in Discovery Channel, by the way, that the theory had been mentioned before, but he kind of gave it an astronomical touch to it, that the two pyramids, there are 3 pyramids at Giza, the 2 major ones were built by the same pharaoh rather than Khufu and Khafra. He believed that Khufu built the 2. The reason being is that he wanted 2 pyramids in order to express the symbol of the horizon, which is 2 mounds with the sun setting in the middle. And it's true that at certain times of the year, the sun will inevitably set between the 2 pyramids as you look at them, and you actually see this giant hieroglyph. Now, because the site is called Khufu's horizon, then he thought, wait a minute, it makes sense. He calls it the horizon. The sign of the horizon, the hieroglyphic sign, is 2 mounds of the sun. That's what he wanted to do, to build a huge material hieroglyph. And I warned him, said, be careful, because there's a problem there. There's many problems. This theory has been presented before. He went ahead and did it. On the translation of Khufu's name for the site, Khufu's horizon. If he had listened to me, he would have known that the word horizon in the Old Kingdom was not written with 2 mounds and the sun in the middle. It was written with a crested ibis.
Right.
It doesn't work. There's a fundamental flaw in the reasoning.
Right.
It's okay if you simply accept the translation, because you can't see the sign, you know, he believed so much in his idea that he didn't take it a step further and check the source and say, okay, let me see the hieroglyph. Let me see how it's written. I really need to see it myself. And he would have quickly realized that if Khufu wanted to build a hieroglyphic sign, he should have built a giant ibis, you know, and not these 2 mounds. You know? Right. So the theory falls apart. And that's the danger. So never, never do this. If you're serious about your work, I mean, if you write any old rubbish, that's something else. So having said this, you know, I find that a lot of these theories, I mean, with all due respect to the writers, do not properly go to their sources. You know, and one quotes the other. I mean, you know, sometimes I'm quoted.
Sometimes I know several that actually quote themselves from other books.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quoted, and I keep telling them, don't quote me, you know, check me out. You know, Robert Bauval says so, that means it's a fact. No, it's not a fact. I actually found one that, to make a point, quoted his last book, which when you went to the references at the back of that book for the quote was actually himself from another book. So it just carried on and on and on. I thought, oh, yeah, I mean, where was the source? Because I was trying to chase the source. Well, I mean, okay, it demonstrates an amateurish approach, because researchers of the type that I'm talking about know very well that it's impressive when you put sources, but it doesn't mean anything unless the source is worth the weight behind it. So, you know, people write books think because we're sourcing, it gives an academic tag to my book.
Yeah.
But who is the source? And is the source okay? I mean, sometimes you think you're sourcing correctly and you find that the source took it from another source.
Yeah, that's true.
So if you're taking something, so having said this, you know, I find that some of the theories are interesting. What is disappointing is that the evidence that should buttress these ideas is not. And therefore, to me, you know, okay, it makes nice reading, it's entertaining, but if you don't have the serious buttress, then it's meanerless.
Okay, one of the things, Robert, that you know, a lot of the world is looking at the moment, not least of which because there's a big, you know, cinema film coming out, and there's God knows how many books and films being made on it. 2012, you know, the main concept of either the end of the world or a great enlightening of mankind or the end of an age and the start of a new one, etc. What do you have any, you know, have you looked into that? Do you have any beliefs in it?
Yeah. I wanted to say something in general before answering this.
Please do.
I was referring to the Old Testament just a minute ago. And, you know, you got those who simply accept it as a matter of faith. There's no discussion here. If you approach it as an historian, then it's a different thing altogether. You know, and then comes the discussions of who, what, and so I compare this to these books that are written. You know, I remember once, I mean, one of my editors said, you know, the reason your book is successful, it's very entertaining. And although he meant it as a compliment, I thought that's not why I wrote it. I mean, you know, I'm glad it's entertaining, but is that why you bought it, because it's entertaining? You know, and that is the confusion. They become popular readerships, you know,
Yeah.
and people buy them because it's entertaining. I mean, it's entertaining to read about strange theories and controversies and conspiracies. But the danger is that entertainment, like Dan Brown, for example, it's very entertaining. But I mean, look what it's done. I mean, it's made people believe in this fiction, if you like.
Yeah.
And that's kind of frightening to me, because you can really confuse a lot of people. Now, academics or people who are used to research know very well that, okay, it's fine, it's entertaining, but that's what it is. Don't get into whether it's true or not. But the general public who is unaccustomed to these kind of presentations, you know, take it on face value. I mean, you know, Dan Brown goes on television, says Jesus had a baby, and yeah. You know, and, so the danger is that you can create one hell of a confusion. And I agree with those critics that I've been criticized. Hence why I'm very, very careful with my work, is that I tend to agree with what they say. You know, be careful, because it's one thing writing books like this, but you do have a responsibility to those who are going to read them. I mean, the thing that I am very cautious when I go at conference, for example. You know, people say, Robert, you know, I really believe in your theory. I say, no.
Question.
I even have doubts myself. There is no smoking gun proof here. There's a very compelling theory. It makes sense. But until we have the smoking gun, I'm not going to stand up and say, I swear it's true. You know, but it works both ways. I've had academics who, you know, say things and finally say, well, why do you say this? You know, like there's nothing behind the door of the pyramid, for example. You know, why do you say that? The right thing to say is there may be nothing. So this is the danger. And when you've been in this business for a long, long time, you know what to choose and what to use and how to find your sources. And even then, I mean, sometimes I check the sources that come from very, very high quality. Professional archaeologists who have been in the business for 30 years, 40 years, and they make a statement. Well, I'm very cautious. It depends what the statement is about and what I'll be using it for. If it has great importance to my thesis, I will check it, I will get another. So I'll get a second opinion, if you like. I'll check another person who's written about the same thing, and if there's a conflict of opinion, then I'll check a third one, and then see and at least get a feel of what is the right answer. So to me, you know, I'm sorry, I would recommend, I mean, many of them are my friends, there's no doubt about it, and some have written excellent books, and some perhaps are probably right, I don't know. But I tell this to the readers, do not, even my books, do not simply accept them on face value. You have a duty to yourself, and the writer has a duty to you. You have to examine these things. Unless you read them for entertainment, that's something else, and then there's no point. Entertainment, then you watch TV as well.
Okay. Well, after the break, we're going to get a little bit more out of Robert Bauval when I'm going to push him on 2012, and I'm probably going to ask him about aliens landing on top of pyramids and things as well, which I'll probably get in trouble for. So join me then. Hello there, welcome back to Gardiner's World, where we're joined by the great and powerful Robert Bauval, author of numerous best-selling international books, and in, I have no idea how many languages. It's loads, isn't it now?
I think about 25.
25, is it just 25? Before the break, we were talking about, you know, other people's books, etc., etc., and I did ask you a question about 2012 and what you thought, and you haven't actually answered the question. So what do you think about 2012?
I'm going to tell you in a minute.
Go on.
Let me say, because
like
there's a strange, you know, I knew these questions would come, and, you know, I have my standard answers, but I use anecdotes and parables to make my point very often, and I will never forget being totally astounded, giving a talk in my very early days, when my first book was published. I was at the Astronomical Society, not quite sure of Leeds or somewhere there, and one of the guests, one of the people in the audience, kept shouting at me, you know, and finally we stopped, and I said, what's the problem? And they pointed the lights at him, and he said, you know, I've sent you my theories, and you haven't even bothered to reply. And so I give him a chance. I said, well, what is it about? And it was one of those crazy theories, all right? And rather than be rude, I thought it's best not to reply. You know, it was really a far-fetched theory. But finally, I thought I'm going to quote him a phrase that has been used by, I think it was Gerald Hawkins, in a similar conference where he was accused of not being open-minded. And he came up with this wonderful thing. He said, I'm happy to be open-minded. I'm not happy to have my brains drop out, you know, to please you. And there's one thing about having the mind open and the brains dropping out. I'm not happy to respond to somebody who tells me there is a flying saucer buried under the pyramid.
Are you telling me there isn't?
You know, I hate to say this, but first of all, it's very tempting. I mean, okay, I'll admit something I've rarely admitted in public. I was very interested in the alien theories when I was young, like everybody did. And I'm talking like a long time ago. The moon landing in '69, I mean, I was in my early 20s, and Daniken had just published his books. We're all open to this. I mean, that's why his book was successful, by the way, because suddenly it was possible to travel. So if we went, they can come, you know. And therefore, I was very interested, and I started thinking of the pyramids in the same way that a lot of these alien theories go about it. I thought, you know, it must be aliens. You know, nobody can do this. How they lift the stones, you know? Surely, you know, we can't do this. You know? A lot of people who develop these kind of theories, surprisingly, haven't actually seen the pyramid physically. You know? And I was astounded. I mean, one of my dear friends in this business, Robert Temple, who wrote the Serious Mystery, which is a fantastic book because it's stimulated. I mean, you don't have to agree with it, but it's a very stimulating book. Kicked a lot of dust at the time. Indeed, I start my first book, The Orion Mystery, talking about Robert Temple's theory and thinking, well, let's see if there's anything worth looking at there. I was surprised that when I met him in '95 or '96, he told me he'd never been to Egypt. And I thought, Robert, you come on, after 20 years, you weren't that interested to go and see the pyramids. So I finally took him there. For the first time, it was a trip with me. He's been there many times since. You know, and when you see those things, you know, they're very exciting. The Great Pyramid is an enormous monument. But all these ideas that aliens did it dissipate because, you know, you see the thing and you see that there is imperfections. I mean, people say it's perfect, it's absolutely, you know, the stones, you can't put a blade between. It's not true. I mean, okay, there is construction which is very accurate. I'm the first one to say that. I mean, I find them awesome, but I find them awesome in the context of ancient Egypt, you know, in the context of down-to-earth ancient Egypt. You know, the inside core of the pyramid, for example, is very rough. You know, the stones are piled topsy-turvy. I mean, we're not talking about, you know, sort of laser construction here. Right. There are faults in constructions. There are, you know, so when one sees the reality, then you really begin to see them. And I think it's doing a disfavor to our origins, to our real origins, you know. Yeah. We have a pedigree. We have a great pedigree. Yeah. There is a mystery in the past. We may come from a much more sophisticated source. But then to say, no, it's not us, it's some aliens who came down and did it all for us. You know, what a disfavor to do to ourselves. I mean, absolutely. You know, 10,000 years of civilization, even more, suddenly it's not us, you know. That annoys me because I've kept an open mind. I mean, people think I'm not open-minded, but I've kept an open mind. I had long talks with Eric von Daniken. I've been a speaker to many of his conferences, and I know I've met Sitchin a couple of times, Richard Hoagland. I nearly wrote a book with him. You know. But I must say that although their views are interesting and exciting, I haven't been convinced by any evidence. The evidence is not convincing. It's exciting, it's stimulating, it's curious, but I would not place a whole conclusion about our origins simply because some things look a bit weird, you know. So I'm sorry. I mean, that's it. Now coming to 2012. Well, it's a date. I mean, for one thing, I mean, it's a date from our Gregorian calendar. I mean, when you say 2012, we're talking about the Gregorian calendar here. So we have to talk Mayan calendar, right? The Mayans, it's true, believed in a cycle that would end in what we date as 2012, December 2012. They believed in it. Now the Egyptians believed in it too. I mean, the Egyptians had the Sotic cycle, you know. And so we're creating all this fuss on a belief by an ancient people. You know, it's a bit like the belief that the Middle Ages had that at the millennium there would be the second coming, you know. Yeah. There is a curious thing about this day, 2012. I mean, one of my very good friends is John Major Jenkins. Right, yeah. My ex-co-author, Adrian Gilbert, wrote quite a lot about it. I was in Dubai with John Major Jenkins last year, and we had long talks about this. But, you know, even he, who has researched this deeply, you know, is not, you know, he's not putting his mortgage on it, I can tell you that. It's an interesting thing to look at. Why did the Mayans come up with this? How come they knew this kind of astronomy? That is interesting. Yes. But to actually conclude that we're going to have a catastrophic event and you should build some sort of a shelter and go and hide in it, is to me, it's exactly the sort of thing that we don't want to do because people take this on face value. And we have all sorts of cults. I mean, I've been hearing 2012, you know, and boy, it's going to get even worse. Have you, I mean, like me, you've probably been invited off to go and live in some strange underground place somewhere, or given a house in the wilderness, because I've had quite a few people. I know. I mean, there's a place for you, Phil. Many strange offers, you know, but many things. But 2012 is an astronomical date. So far, there is nothing at all that suggests that there will be anything of the sort that people are. In fact, as a matter of fact, the Mayans themselves did not see it as the end of the world. They saw it as the end of a cycle. Yeah. Some people want to be optimistic and say, well, it will be the beginning of a world's great enlightenment, and we're all going to hold hands and become spiritual, united and all that. I see lots of signs of that. Now, I'll tell you what is interesting more than the reality of it, and that, to me, is interesting, is the psychological effect it's having. Yeah. And that may be worth it. If all this fuss about 2012 make people think that, yeah, we should have a spiritual enlightenment, then
Yeah.
good, why not?
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. So from that point of view, yeah, but then it works as a talisman rather than a real event. It's simply causing an effect.
Self-fulfilling in a way.
Well, that's fine. I mean, if it does that, why not? So it's a bit like making a prophecy, and then because the prophecy is brought out all the time, it becomes, like you say, self-fulfilling. Then the prophecy has become talismanic. It works a kind of strange magic, if you like.
Well, you know all about that because you wrote this really good book with Graham Hancock called Talisman, which
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed. So, what was that all about?
Well, talisman, basically the title says it all. It's subtitled Sacred Cities, Secret Faith. And,
It's just there. Do you want to pass it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's in my bookshelf.
Yeah.
This is the book, and it was a few years ago now. Forget what year this was.
This was in 2003.
Superb book. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, basically what talisman really is
Forgive us a minute. We're just
yeah.
reading.
I remember. Let me show you this because that's how the book was taken, by the way, by a. You can't see it on camera too well, but
Sorry about this.
you know, I took it to the publisher and I just saw them two photographs, and I described that they were looking at an overview of the city of Paris, and I showed them from the Louvre to La Défense along the historical axis, which is the Champs-Élysées, and various monuments and how the axis deviated and so forth. And then I said I showed them another picture which was taken earlier. And they looked at it, and they looked at it, and they said, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then I said, well, no, the second picture is in Paris. It's the city of Luxor in Egypt. And they went, what? You know, and that's talisman. Are we looking at strange coincidence, perceptions that are distorted, or are we looking at something more strange, which could be a kind of game that is being played by God knows who to create what we call talismans, to create
Some great architects somewhere.
Well, you know, let me give you a very good example of how talisman works. And if you go on the embankment in London,
Yeah.
on the Victoria Embankment, you will see an ancient Egyptian obelisk. It's been there since 1878, I think. Now, amazingly, you go there today and people stop and they take pictures, and it's become a kind of London landmark. It's actually called Cleopatra's Needle.
That's right.
It's nothing to do with Cleopatra. It's actually an obelisk belonging to Moses III, brought from Heliopolis to Alexandria. It stood in Alexandria for several thousand years. Cleopatra used it, as a matter of fact, for one of her temples, and then it was taken by the British as a gift from Egypt and brought to the embankment. It was supposed to be, by the way, in front of St. Paul's Cathedral, and there is reasons for that. Now, you go there, and suppose you have no idea what this thing is. No idea whatsoever, but it is intriguing. I mean, you know, it looks like a very strange thing. Now, maybe 10 people will just look at it, take a photograph, and go away. One may say, what is it? Now, he's asked the question, and why is it here? The second step is, okay, he's asked the question, will he pursue it? If he does pursue it, and he takes it to the limit, he will become completely initiated in two cults. A modern cult, he'll become a Freemason, I can tell you. And he will become an ancient Egyptian adept. Automatically, he will, not knowingly, become those things.
Yeah.
He has self-initiated himself by exploring his question.
Yeah.
It's a bit like Newton said, why did the apple fall?
Yeah.
And the minute he investigated, he literally discovered gravity and mechanics, laws of mechanics that lead us finally to take men to the moon and to Mars. So that's how a talisman works. Now, is it deliberate? Did somebody put it there to cause this effect, or is it just one of those things?
Yeah.
When you examine these monuments around the world, you realize that many of them, not all of them, but many of them, are deliberately placed to cause this effect. But they're only interested in he who will pursue the quest. It's like a recruiting machine. You know, it's like We want you, you know.
So therefore, do you think this is the Freemasons that have done this?
I have no doubt.
I mean, like Washington.
Yeah, I mean, but one mustn't see it as a sort of sordid thing here. I mean, the Freemasons are people in our modern world who have studied what the ancients studied, which is symbolism and how these things work. You know, we don't realize that when you're watching an advertisement. I'll tell you one thing, because I did a marketing course, and I know you did that too. Maybe that analogy will hit better. I remember when I did my marketing course, they gave us one of the Pirelli ads to examine. And they wanted us to find how many messages there were hidden. And you know these famous Pirelli ones, they're very odd messages. Yeah. They're selling tires. So we watched one of them, and we counted about 300 in a matter of 36 seconds.
Blimey.
And so imagine, there's sort of like 10 every second.
Yeah.
Images flying all over the place, you know, and strange images. I mean, images that are supposed to somehow cause an effect on you. You know. The idea being is that they cast on you, literally, images that have meaning, but then the meaning gets tied to their product, the tire.
Yeah.
So every time you see these images, you think tire. You know,
that association going on.
Yeah, it's an association. So they show you things that you normally see and are affected by, like a cross on a cathedral, you know. Or a baby bleeding or something like that. I mean, they went very far. I mean, some of them were stopped because they were using archetypal symbols, which are very dangerous. You know, like bleeding, dying people and stuff like that. The colors of Benetton, I don't know if you remember.
Yes.
Now,
we're going to have to go back to that after the break. So join us after the break when we're with author of this and many other books, Robert Bauval. Hello there, welcome back to Gardiner's World, where we've been joined by Robert Bauval, the great and powerful Robert Bauval, and we've been talking about talisman.
Yeah, you keep saying great and powerful. I mean,
oh, you are. I mean, look at this lot. You're all your followers.
No, we're writers, all right? And, I mean, we might be great in other things. I mean,
well, you're talking about how powerful it is, the things that we do. You know?
Yeah, you know, we were talking about people shouting at you and criticizing, you know, during talks and all this. One of the things that I always do, sorry, I'm deviating a bit here, but it's not me that you should shout at. You know, you should look at what I write and the science behind what I write. Yeah. That's what you want to criticize. Yeah. You know, it's nothing to do with me. I happen to be the guy who writes it. You know, so this personalized approach to, you know, so I honestly don't see great or powerful or this stuff. You know. I know some great and powerful people, but it's not me. The point I was making, and coming back to the Pirelli ad, is that we thought, wonderful, you know, we're a bunch of students, and we thought 300, they're going to be very impressed, and we can fish them out. When they told us that, in fact, there was 3,000 of them, I couldn't believe it. And I thought, bloody hell, I mean, you know, can I swear here? I don't know. You know, it's incredible that there was so much undetected, and we were supposed to be in marketing studies. And that was frightening. I'll tell you why it was frightening. Because as we played those images, we began to realize that images that should mean something to you, important images, like a baby crying. A baby crying is important to you as a human being because it makes you think of motherhood, it makes you think of parenthood, it makes you think of your own children, it makes you think of life. You don't want to think of tires, you know. So they're confusing your links that are made naturally. Yeah. And that is dangerous. Now, the Masons have been studying this because they know very well that many, many, many things that have happened in our history are stupidly happening because of this game. I mean, the Crusade, for example. I mean, all you had to do was brandish a cross and saying, follow me, and everybody went and got themselves killed. The Nazis, who used symbolism in a crazy manner that caused a world war and terrible genocide. You know, this is how symbol. I mean, I'll give you a very good example of a symbol. A rock. A rock means nothing. It's a piece of stone. The rock on Mount Zion. You know, we've had 500 years of crusades fighting over this damn rock. And what? We have the eternal Israeli-Palestinian problem on this rock. It's a rock, but this rock has become so meaningful. The meaning has been played around so much that people actually die for it. And that's, to me, is the madness if you're not careful about how these things work. There is a science behind this. It's a very, very powerful science. Now, frankly, I believe that if an ancient Egyptian priest would materialize in this room now, he would frighten the daylights out of us because he was an adept to the science. He would scare you because he would make you see things, he would make you believe things merely by playing with symbols and words. The Egyptians called the words of these powerful men the words of power. You were saying, Robert Bauval, power. If you want to talk about power, then yes, powerful words. As a writer, I know this. You can create such power behind the words to make your point. You know, and we writers are very clever. You know, we use things like metaphors and oxymorons and paradoxes. You know, a famous phrase by Shakespeare, you know, love is such sweet sorrow. You know, I mean, wow, it creates a whole confusion in your mind. How can it be sweet and sorrowful? You know, I have a wonderful one that I use in my books, which, you know, from Winston Churchill. One of the most famous speeches in modern history was Winston Churchill's speech after the Battle of El Alamein, where after 3 years of war against the German, there hadn't been one single battle won against the Axis, the German Axis, until finally they put the package, they sent everything with the 8th Army and Montgomery to Egypt, and they finally gave a beating to the Germans at El Alamein. And a beating to who? To the famous General Rommel, you know, who was supposed to be the unbeatable general. So of course this was a great message, you know, victory, you know, wow, let's make a big deal out of it. So of course, you know, Churchill prepared his speech, and they have the press. It's been filmed. It's a wonderful thing. And he goes out there and he says exactly the opposite of what they wanted to hear. They wanted him to shout victory, and we've given a licking to the Germans, and we're going to beat them, you know, this business. And he says, this is not the end. And they think, give us some good news, it's not the end. And it goes like this: this is not the end. This is not the beginning of the end, but it is the end of the beginning. And the oxymoron had such an effect that the press sort of waits a few seconds and then they clap like mad because they finally get it. The message is, change your mood here. It's the end of the beginning. We've changed the tides of war, and it did change the tide of war. Now, these are words of power. This is, if you're religious, the words of power of Jesus with the Magdalena. You know, he who has not committed sin cast the first stone. People don't realize that what he did with these words. He didn't just stop them stoning. He changed the law that was ingrained for generations in the Jewish people, that they had to conform to God's law and stone this woman. He changed it with his words. So these are words of power. This is magic. But if you toy around with this the wrong way, and you can enhance the power of these words with symbols, with monuments. You know, I imagine that when he was saying this, there was a huge cross behind him, you know, or music, you know, as you know, with television. So that is talismanic magic. And I got very intrigued with this because I realized that what I was studying with the ancient Egyptians was that science. Now, I mean, Churchill would have looked like a choir boy compared to an Egyptian high priest. Boy, the Egyptian high priest would have taught him some lessons about how to send words of power. You need words of power to get people building a pyramid that stands 146 meters high. You're not going to convince them with a meager salary. So that is what is interesting about studying this science, and especially in ancient times, because that's what we respond to. You know, and it's such a sad thing that it's become used more in commercial activities to sell us toothpaste, rather than use it for good purposes so that people receive powerful messages and respond to them.
So you think that what is your opinion as to why these great big devices have been placed upon the Earth?
Well, I think that if one examines certain of them. I mean, okay, it's no secret. The minute you study the position of obelisks that have been taken out of Egypt, I mean, there's one in front of the Vatican, for God's sake, which is from Heliopolis as well. Now, I'll tell you, this is a very strange story, because it was put there by Bernini, whom Dan Brown made a big deal about. It's true that Bernini probably dabbled in new ideologies that were being flaunted around, the Copernican view.
Right.
Galileo was actually having his trial in the Vatican while Bernini was designing the Piazza St. Peter. They say they communicated together. Now, one of the things that was shocking and frightening is that here was a man, Galileo, who brought hard evidence that our Earth was a globe, that it was not the center of our system, that the sun was the center of our system. It was hard evidence. And the church was saying no, on authority. And suddenly there was a scare here, because the church was putting itself on the line here. Yeah. And they were frightened, because the church was making not only a terrible mistake, it was claiming that God had instructed them to say this. So people like Bernini, perhaps, people like the other scholars around that were following this, Newton, they were all shocked by this, decided that perhaps rather than let this mistake be, to leave it, if it was going to be muffled by the church, at least to leave it visible for others to discover. When you look at the obelisk of the Piazza St. Peter, it is in the center of an ellipse. And around the ellipse are the stellar systems. This obelisk is clearly a solar symbol. Yeah. Under the very nose of the Pope is the Copernican and Galilean theory. Yeah. And that's spooky. That's how it works. Even the Pope didn't see it. You know, you have this in art. You know, there was a big fuss, of course, done with Da Vinci Code and what Da Vinci did. It's possible. It's very possible that artists were inserting what Graham and I have begun to call hermetic devices. They're kind of intellectual time bombs. And they're left in there, and they're dormant, and then somebody sees them, and bang, they wake up. The Orion correlation theory is one of those. You know, if it is true what I'm saying, then there is an intellectual time bomb here that was dormant for nearly 5,000 years, and then somebody says, hey, 3 pyramids, 3 stars, and everything changes.
It kind of implies, you know, in the last 5 minutes of the show, it kind of implies that there's what's one man called a golden thread, you know, through time. Well, this is being passed on.
Absolutely. I mean, you've just hit the nail here. If you look at what we say here, you know, what we suggest, and we're still not sure, because this is the weird thing about all this, is that what we suggest is that there is a history under the history. There is a secret history. We did intellectual archaeology here. We kind of went below what history has been presented. And the weird thing is that you find that there is a movement going on. It can be broadly called the Hermetic movement or the Gnostic movement. There is clearly an anti-papal movement that has been moving around. You know, a lot of people feel strongly, and I do too, that for 2,000 years we've been the victims of Rome, if you like. Some crazy ideas that have emerged from a nation that was one of the most horrifically powerful and destructive nation, the Roman Empire. And they, in a sense, hijacked a very gentle religion and turned it into a power base. And the next thing we know, we have 2,000 years of indoctrination. You know, there's people who have been fighting against it, people who got burned because of this. So we began to see a history behind that, and then it emerged in secret societies, which I'm sure you know a lot about. And suddenly, it expresses itself not only in monumental buildings. You know, I'll quote you a few, you know, St. Paul's Cathedral, for example. A lot of people don't know St. Paul's Cathedral was designed under the lines of Solomon's Temple. Why? You know, when you look behind all this, you find that all the protagonists involved with the Royal Society. The Royal Society was deeply involved with the so-called Invisible College, who is an offspring of the lodges that were emerging from the Stuart dynasties. So, you know, there's a whole thing behind all this. The question is, what is real and what is imagined? You know, sometimes you imagine them.
Some of it's copy too, isn't it? There's a lot of copy goes off.
My conclusion is that there are some very clever people with very benevolent ideas that have created a landscape that will slowly emerge, if you like, and suddenly we realize that what we have is not Roman Christian cities. What we have is Hermetic cities that have wonderful messages about learning and about finding our spirituality and so forth.
Lots of little New Jerusalems and utopias all over the place.
Yeah. We talk about that in the book.
Absolutely. That's why I love the book. It says it all in that respect. I mean, do you think that they're still around today, these people who are still doing these things, still putting these messages into the big buildings?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you one that we talk a lot about here. One which was supposed to be a fun thing, the placing of a golden capstone on top of the Great Pyramid at the Millennium. Clearly, the implications, the symbolism was enormous, very Masonic. And when we studied who was who and who was what, clearly there was some sort of manipulation going on there. The other one, which is more macabre, is of course 9/11. You see, a lot of people do not question what's the message behind it. What are they trying to tell the world? And it's kind of spooky when you look at the kind of targets they chose, the kind of symbolism, the kind of dates, by the way. You know, people haven't examined properly why they chose that particular date. And to me, yes, there's a movement going on. One of it is malevolent in a sense, or at least seen from the other perspective, I mean, this kind of destruction.
Subjective, yeah.
But the majority of it is benevolent. You know, it's people who have had to operate in the dark because either of bias to their views or even dangerous positions. I mean, if you were in the Middle Ages or if you were in the Renaissance, you'd get burned for such ideas. And now you get sort of ostracized and accused of all sorts of things, but at least you don't get burnt. But they're dangerous ideas to the orthodoxy who wants to maintain a status quo. The status quo is the manipulation of the human race. It's the game. The human race wants to liberate itself, and some people try, you know.
So what's the future for Robert Bauval? We've got, you're working on, what's the new book? The
Black Genesis.
Black Genesis. So that's worth a look out for, because I know that is just stunning, and that's what Andrew Goff talked to you about.
Indeed.
On the show. And if you want to know more, it's www.robertbauval.co.uk, and I know that because Fuzzy is sat over there and he sorts out Robert Bauval's website, and I think he deserves a mention, so hello Fuzzy.
Let's give his real name, Richard Fuzniak.
Richard Fuzniak.
Known to Fuzzy as everybody.
They're going to hate us both. Thank you very much for coming on the show. It was absolutely superb.
Thank you.
And I do hope to see you again, and a good trip back to Spain and wherever else in the world it is you're going to uncover your great mysteries.
Well, I can tell you, it's the Eastern Sahara.
It's
in the Sahara.
In the Sahara. Remember, handkerchiefs, tie the corners, you'll be fine.
Indeed.
There's my tip for today.